If you've been thinking about traveling to Cuba, now may be your chance. JetBlue and American Airlines are now flying to the island, but there are still some restrictions. News 13's Allison Walker-Torres is going in depth now to get all the do's and don'ts of traveling to the island nation.
Two major airlines are now taking travelers to Cuba. We're talking about JetBlue and American Airlines. So joining me right now is Steve Marshall, CEO of CubaVentures.com. Thanks for being with us, Steve. Appreciate that. Absolutely. You know, you're going to help us go in depth when discussing the do's and don'ts of traveling to the island. So travelers, I mean, they haven't been able to get to Havana like this in years.
50 years, yeah, exactly.
So what does this mean for people who now want to visit?
Well, I mean, flights from the U.S. right now, even from Orlando, down to $90. So essentially, just about anybody who is interested in going and seeing this culturally rich country can do so.
I mean, and you, having lived there for what, 11 years, you said?
Yeah, 12 years. Yeah.
So you're obviously an expert in traveling to Cuba. So what are some pieces of advice you have for some of us first-timers?
Well, I think Americans should visit Cuba with an open mind, okay? What I mean by that is that you're not going to get all of the niceties and the luxury that you can get in some of the Floridian resorts, okay? But what you will see is, as I said, a very rich culture. You will also see what I call a time warp, essentially. The 50s cars, the colonial buildings, and just these beautiful people. Cubans are just amazing people.
And you talked about the music, too.
Oh, the music is just mind-blowing. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, but some strict laws, they could keep a foreigner trapped in Cuba if, say, they're the driver responsible for an accident. So what do you advise? Should we drive?
There are a couple of quirky laws, and one of them is that if there is an accident in Cuba, that the traveler could be held until the issue is resolved. Okay. Now, the way of getting around that is real simple, and that is just do not rent cars. Okay, there is an abundance of taxis, especially the 1950s taxis, which everybody wants to travel in anyway. Okay, and getting from point A to point B in Cuba is very simple. So that, you know, taxis, basically the best choice for anybody. I would not recommend renting a car.
And outside of Havana, what are some secret places maybe just you would know about that is not so mainstream?
Well, exactly. Obviously, Havana, you can make a tour of Havana in 2 days, but within 1.5 hours drive from Havana, you can visit the colonial city, 500-year-old city, Trinidad. You can visit Cienfuegos, which is literally like 30 minutes from Trinidad. And then you also have cities such as Pinar del Rio, which is infamous for its the tobacco-growing region of Cuba. In fact, all of the cigars that are sold worldwide from Cuba, which, as you know, are the best cigars in the world, are grown in Pinar del Rio. That is an hour from Havana. So there are lots of things to see.
And I'm curious to know how President-elect Donald Trump's strong stance on foreign countries, you know, how that'll impact our newly formed bond with Cuba. What do you think?
Right. Well, I think that President-elect Trump is first and foremost a businessman. Okay, he's looking at creating jobs for U.S. citizens in the U.S. Okay, and now we've seen companies such as Google, Starwood, Southwest. We've just mentioned JetBlue, and many U.S. companies are now employing staff, and they have the synergies with Cuba in terms of sending tourism to Cuba. Now, that is one thing that I think will be a continuation of Obama's stance in terms of what Trump will do. I think he will continue with that simply because there's just been too many jobs created surrounding this issue of travel to Cuba.
And finally, when asking people where they want to go, they typically don't say, let's take the family to Havana. So do you think that these major airlines now taking us to and from that this could help make Cuba a top destination?
Yes, of course. I mean, there are certain things about Cuba. For example, you have the National Aquarium, fantastic for kids. You have anybody who wants to show their kids rich cultural history, 500-year-old cities. These are the oldest cities in the Americas, by the way, okay? So anybody who's longing to show their children some type of heritage in this hemisphere would take their kids to Cuba.
Wow.
And there are plenty of things to do with kids, by the way.
Excellent. Steve Marshall, thank you so much for your expertise.
very
We really
much.
appreciate it. Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Got it.